Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another North Metro SBDC webinar. Very exciting today. We're going to be talking to you about planning for uncertainty, how to make smart decisions. Could have used this webinar about 10 years ago, but here we are today, and it's going to be great. We're joined by some all-stars from the North Metro SBDC. We've got Lauren Kmetz from Antora CPA, Front Range's friendliest, most efficient CPA. And we have Adrian Hovey, who's also very good.
That stuff.
Yeah, financial advisor for Edward Jones, and also one of our consultants here at North Metro SBDC. Like always, we have our question feature active. So at any moment, if a question comes into your mind, you can use that question box on the right side of your screen if you're on a computer. It's down at the bottom if you're using the mobile app for GoToWebinar. But you can just text in your question, and we'll ask it or answer it as soon as we have an opportune moment. And then we usually take a few moments for question and answer at the end. So, yep, please stick around through the broadcast and let us know if you have any questions. And I'll turn it over to Lauren and Adrian. Go ahead.
All right. Good morning, everybody. We're going to go through a presentation we put together around planning for uncertainty. We know there's been a lot of questions coming in. You know, how do we handle the election? How do we handle all of these, you know, fiscal and monetary relief packages that are coming through? So Lauren and I thought it'd be a good idea to kind of team up and help people understand what their options are and how to handle it. So over to you, Lauren.
Yeah, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Lauren Kmetz. I'm the owner of Antora CPA, and I help individuals and small businesses with their accounting and tax needs. And I'm a financial consultant with the SBDC. And what about you, Adrian? Who are you?
Who am I? I often ask myself that question every morning. You know, I've been a consultant here at the SBDC for a while. I've been helping folks write business plans for almost 10 years now. Through my alma mater, and you know, my day job is financial planning. So, you know, the idea of getting plans, thinking strategically, all that stuff is kind of, you know, it's always been something I've been doing and interested in. So, yeah, happy to be here to help people out and talk through some ways to make the most out of the rest of this year. Cool. All right, so we're gonna go through, throw up a little legal disclaimer here just to make sure everybody understands. You know, there are things we're going to talk about, and you know, we're not talking about individual situations here. We're not talking about specific situations. We're kind of just talking in general about how to plan and, you know, how to kind of, like I said before, maximize the time we have left in 2020. And if you have some specific tax questions or some specific planning questions, best to take those offline if they pertain to your situation. Otherwise, great to ask during this presentation. I just want to make sure everybody understands that. Okay, so we're gonna kind of kick things off, and you know, Lauren's gonna walk us through something that's very, you know, front and center right now, with the payroll tax deferral.
Yep, so this started September 1st, so we're in full swing with this now, and this goes through the end of this year. So this payroll tax deferral is the employee portion of your Social Security taxes, which equals 6.2% of wages, can be deferred from this period. And understand that this is not a tax credit. So if someone takes advantage of this deferral, that doesn't mean that that tax just gets to go away and you don't get to pay it. Starting in January, that's going to start to be repaid. So either you need to repay it, or the employer is going to increase the withholding starting next year and start taking more out of the paycheck. And so one of the things we wanted to address regarding this is this may seem like something that is automatic and everyone has to participate, and that's not the case. Employers get to choose, and you can let your employees choose if they want to opt in or opt out of this program. If you have employees, talk to your payroll provider and see what options you can give your employees. And if you're self-employed without employees, you may think this might not apply to you, but if you have a spouse that is employed that you share finances with, and they've been enrolled in this payroll tax deferral, you need to know what repercussions this is going to have for you. So if your employer did not give you an option to opt out of this program, and you're going to be seeing a little bit larger of a paycheck now through the rest of this year. So it's important to have a little savings account set aside for this extra money for next year, that you can repay that without it being a little catastrophic to your personal finances. So just be sure to educate yourself on this program on behalf of your employees so you can answer any questions that they have.
Awesome. Yep. And I think I'll just reiterate that point back to the educating yourself and your employees. Part of that education is knowing where you stand with it, right? So whether that is, like Lauren said, where you have to plan or you don't, but I think the most important thing is just kind of knowing where you stand and what your own situation is the first level of understanding there. Okay, we also wanted to talk a little bit about an emergency fund. So, Lauren, did you want to talk about the first three real quick, and then I'll cover the last two?
Sure. And so an emergency fund is a really foundational concept that's talked about in personal finance quite a bit. And we tend to forget about this or gloss over it in terms of business finance, but it's really pertinent to the survival of a business, as we're learning this year. So how much needs to be in your emergency fund really depends on your risk tolerance and what kind of business you have and how it might weather different kinds of storms, so to speak. So, anywhere from a 3 to 12 months cash cushion, and that's expenses to cover. So what are your monthly living expenses? And so we'll do this both on the personal side and the business side. If you had no income coming in, how much do you need saved for a month worth of living? And then maybe set aside 3 months to 12 months of those expenses to have it there. So when something catastrophic happens, you can at least feed yourselves, feed your family, get your rent paid, keep a roof over your heads. And I'll let you continue on with that, Adrian.
Yeah, no, this is a huge, huge deal. I think if COVID has taught us anything, it's certainly the importance of having an emergency fund. And I've, like I mentioned earlier, I've been doing business plans for almost 10 years now. And it is rare that I would ever see somebody account for this without being prompted to in a business plan. Like normally people are very good at estimating what expenses they need, rent, utilities, all the normal stuff. But I think oftentimes it's just overlooked that you need to have some cash reserves on hand for, when things don't go according to plan. And on that third bullet, when we're talking about business and personal expenses, I encourage everybody to really kind of think hard about what the impacts of your revenue stream drying up would be on your business and your personal, because your personal cash cushion is kind of separate from your business cash cushion. And so you really, if you're a business owner, you need to have two separate emergency funds, one to cover the business expenses and one to cover your personal, so you don't have to dip into your personal expenses, or sorry, your personal cash to cover that. So it's super important. I think developing that budget is also very important to understand exactly what you need to have set aside, because like Lauren said, we're talking about necessary expenses here. We're not talking about going out to dinner and those type of things. Like, I think it's just assumed that that's not going to happen in an emergency. So you got to make sure you understand, what actually needs to be covered based on your own risk tolerance. And then, not to, beat the dead horse, but I think having a written plan that talks about how and when and why you would deploy the emergency funds is important, especially if you're dealing with partners or you have key employees that are involved in these decisions. They need to understand, what exactly is an emergency and what exactly are we going to use this money for, so there's no disputes, but also so that it, it's kind of a seamless transition from, when we're done with the emergency, we've met these 7 criteria and now we're out of the emergency and it's business as usual. Very important. Okay. Election volatility and market timing. So since the topic of this webinar is planning for things, right? Planning for volatility, planning for uncertainty. We're entering a period right now of tremendous uncertainty in the markets and certainly with the political situation. So the first thing we want to talk a little bit about is what's the impact to your business specifically, right? Are you in a business that is going to be impacted from a political standpoint? You know, do you do a lot of government contracting? Do you have, you know, a clientele that is sensitive to that? And I think just internalizing that, maybe discussing that with your business partners and your key employees, and trying to understand what might be an impact based on how things go in November. Historical precedent, right? So most of the time, the lead up to an election is a time of volatility in both the markets and kind of just sort of, you know, people's social circles. The historical precedent says that we can expect volatility all the way up to the election. And then after the election, generally things kind of settle down. And in the long term, at least from an investing standpoint, there really isn't a lot of impact, right? It doesn't matter who's in office. The market tends to go up and to the right over time. So I think the important thing is just knowing that we're kind of going to be in for a little bit of a wavy ride, and it's only made worse this year because we have COVID also in the mix. So what I'm encouraging people to do, both from their own business and their own, you know, personal finance planning side, is to develop the red and blue plan, right? We don't know who's going to win the election, but we can be pretty sure that, you know, about half the country is going to be disappointed one way or the other. So, you know, come up with your own red and blue plan and talk through it with your business partners and your key employees to figure out, hey, if you know, the country all votes for Trump, what do I need to do? What's going to be the impact to my business? And if it all, you know, goes Biden, what's the impact to me and my business? And, you know, up until I would say this year, you know, there was a lot of folks believe that, you know, we should leave politics out of our business. We should leave politics out of what we do. But I think if you do that, you're kind of ignoring the elephant in the room, right? You don't need to take a stand that would damage your business, but I think you do need to acknowledge that, you know, your customer base is going to feel a certain way, you know, your business is going to feel a certain way, and maybe realize impacts one way or the other. So having a red and blue plan documented on paper that says, hey, these are the things we can expect in our business, and this is what we're going to do about it. It's just good sound planning. Okay, Lauren, let's talk about funding.
Yeah, so in this realm, you know, there's a lot of loan programs going on this year. The one that got the spotlight most of this year was the Paycheck Protection Plan, the PPP loan. At this point, you cannot get new loans from that program, and you may have received that loan and you're working through the forgiveness part. But discussing if you still need additional funds in the business, and a couple things to consider in where you could be at in this consideration. One is that you need cash flow for survival, to keep your doors open, to keep your employees paid, to keep yourself getting a living wage from the business in the next year or foreseeable future. Or is it that you're wanting to grow your business? You're doing pretty well. You're thinking, you know, if you get some money that you can invest into the business, that you can open more stores, hire new employees, all of this. And so if you're in this, you know, either one of these camps, if you're on the survival side, I really want to encourage you to come up with this execution plan. Regardless if you get funding or not, it needs to be budgeted for. You can't get some big loan and then just go out and spend it and then it's gone. And you have to remember that you're going to have to repay this loan. So if you're having a hard time making ends meet right now, what is the risk that you're going to default on this loan and you're not going to be able to repay it, and what that's going to do to your credit and anything else? So really consider that. And then look for alternative funding. There are still some grants available through the state or city and local governments. So explore those programs, because those do not need to be repaid. So that can help increase cash flow in the business without having to pay interest on it. And then consider, before you do go out and take a loan, how else can you reduce expenses? The PPP loan specifically was very stringent on the forgiveness side of how you spend that money. it was incentivized to keep your employees paid, to keep paying your rent or business mortgage. And if you don't have those restrictions, can you let some of those things go? Do you have to retain all of your employees? Can you lay them off? Can you reduce their hours? Really difficult decisions to make, but all part of the conversation if you're looking at taking out another loan. Any other thoughts on that, Adrian?
Yeah. There's an exercise that I always encourage people who are writing business plans to go through, and that's making 3 scenarios from a financial standpoint, right? What's the worst case scenario for my business? What's the expected case, right? And then what's the best case scenario? And this is a time to be very honest with those 3 scenarios when you're looking at, deciding between am I just eking by or am I going to grow? Then understanding, hey, what is the worst possible scenario for my business over the next 1 to 3 years? What is that case that I think is going to happen? And then, what's the best case? But I think, don't cut corners with this exercise. Be very honest, because you do need to understand, like Lauren just said, that there's an implication if you take that funding, if you take that loan. I think the expectation is that you'll use it to grow. So what if over the 3 years or the 5 years that you're looking at, you didn't in fact grow? And be prepared to address that worst case scenario, because for many businesses, 2020 was a worst case scenario. So when you're making that look back on what's happened to date in your business and use that real life information that you have from operations since March, and use that to make your predictions and your projections when you're talking about where you can reduce expenses and how else you can fund your business and how you think it's going to play out.
Hey, quick question for you both
Yeah.
on that seeking funding and kind of tying that back to your emergency fund. What's the risk and reward and advisability of borrowing money to put into an emergency fund if a business is realizing they don't have that cash on hand? Is that a smart plan?
No. I think maybe, in the way that anybody could make a case for something, there's probably 1 or 2 use cases where it might be, but no, I would say the average person, again, we're talking about being in an emergency, so taking money out to fund the emergency only really prolongs that emergency, right? It just kicks the can down the road, and in fact incurs even more risk because of the default possibility and things like that. So you're adding, in my opinion anyway, you're adding another layer of pain and risk on top of something that's already painful and risky.
Yeah, I can understand how it would be appealing, partly because interest rates are so low right now. So it's a great opportunity if you are looking to grow your business and make that investment. But it's still an expense. The interest that you're going to pay on that money is probably more than it's worth to just have it sitting around. So see what you can do in these other rounds of reducing expenses, putting everything else on hold for a while until you've got that cash cushion, so you don't have to take out a loan when the bad times come.
Yeah,
Sounds smart.
And I guess I don't want to undersell the idea of reducing expenses either, because hopefully everybody has taken a hard look at areas where they could be a little more efficient and improve things, but some of that stuff is unfortunately falls under the quality of life umbrella. So it's just one of those things where you have to be honest and decide, hey, is quality of life in the short term more important than the safety and security of my business? And I know it is a tough question, and I empathize with everybody who has to make that choice, but I think now's the time we've got to be honest about that. All right, any other questions on that one, John?
No, I think I would just real quick though put in a plug for consulting services with SBDC for both reducing expenses. For example, our consultant John Jaggers just gave a presentation on lean manufacturing, but he would be a good man to sit down with and talk through your operations if you did need to trim the fat a little bit. And then some people who are watching this may be saying, like, what are these city and local grants that they're talking about? That's something else that North Metro SBDC could help you research and apply for. Right now we have the Enterprise Fund. The Colorado Enterprise Fund grant is going live in its 2nd round, I think on October 5th. And so we could help you apply for that. And there's always other grants and things that you might not be aware of. So you can always make an appointment, northmetrosbdc.com.
Perfect. Thanks, John. Okay. Another sort of hot topic right now is business seasonality. And hopefully you all, maybe if you've never heard that term, you at least have an intuitive understanding of how how your business is affected, depending on what season we're in. So first thing to know is we've got retail versus service businesses. A lot of our SBDC clients fall into those categories. And retail, we're entering into the peak season right now, which of course we know is affected by COVID, also by the election volatility. But I think some of the business owners I've talked to have already seen their service side, anything that involves people, congregating is actually starting to become very popular again. So I think people are getting back out. Some of the more risk tolerant folks are actually engaging in group meetings and things like that. So a lot of these people see an increase right now in demand for their services, whereas retail is still a little bit slow. So I think if you have that intuitive understanding of, hey, normally my September looks like this, my October looks like this, it's probably going to be different this year. So understand that there is going to be a shift in the seasonality curve that you'd normally be comfortable with. And I think you might even see some services picking up more rapidly than before, which might affect your your budgeting and your sort of demand management from now till the end of the year. So I think taking a look at, hey, where was I at last September? Where am I at now? And what changes am I seeing will help you predict and maybe make better inventory decisions and things like that. Same goes for cash flow needs, right? If your seasonality curve is shifting, then your cash flow needs are going to shift. And if you're looking at maybe having a compressed retail season, then what are the impacts of that going to be in 2020? A lot of your businesses will make all of their profit at the end of the year because of that. So be ready for that impact to your business. And I think from a budgeting standpoint, when Lauren and I were talking and getting prepared for this, she brought up a couple of interesting things, which is, how are you going to handle gifting and holiday planning for your business internally this year, right? Like what impacts are there going to be? Is there budget for gifts and holiday parties this year? Are they going to be possible? Does your staff need that? All of these things, and we don't have the answers to those questions individually, but I think, if you haven't, if you've been so in the weeds operating your business, you might not be looking forward to these things. But I think take a minute, have a strategy session and look after your employees and look after some of that, medium-term budgeting where you need to say, hey, do I have the resources or do we even have the interest or the desire to do these things? It's all different. We know COVID's been rough on everybody this year. So, it's just going to have to decide, what's most important to everybody's business, obviously. But I think just having that conversation now and starting to lay plans for it will help you be more effective in the holiday season. And that kind of dovetails nicely into this idea of, retaining your key employees, right? Like obviously we've all been watching the unemployment situation. We've seen people leave jobs because unemployment was more attractive. Every business is going to have key employees that really the business relies on for efficient, effective operations. So the first thing we would recommend is taking a look at how you intend, if you have a desire to retain those key employees. And it starts with leadership and communication. So making sure that if you have key employees, if it's your managers, whoever, that you're co-opting them, you're making sure you're including them in decision making and you're communicating what's happening with your business to them effectively, right? Oftentimes that's something every day. They need to understand where they're at, whether or not the jobs are in jeopardy, how successful is the business, things that maybe you would be a little bit reticent to share with people, when times are really good. I think now is a time to kind of revisit that and say, hey, good leaders communicate, good leaders talk to their employees, good leaders make sure that they share decisions where appropriate and that everybody is informed and on the same page. So some other things to that end, there's an act that was just passed called the Colorado Secure Savings Program. And this is basically going to implement a requirement that businesses with more than 5 employees have a dedicated retirement savings plan. So if you haven't thought about that, think about that now. It'll be state mandated soon anyway, and that's a great way to retain key employees, is give them a little bit of protection for their own retirement. And the same goes for the PPP loan forgiveness. Make sure that people understand where you're at with that. And Lauren, I think you had some comments about that, the loan forgiveness portion specifically too.
Well, sure. We talked about this in the beginning a little bit as well, and just that this program was very stringent on how to use this money if you want forgiveness. And so if you've already qualified for forgiveness, you can now make that choice of, can I lay off employees now, or can I hire more? You're less under that umbrella, or maybe you've developed your plan and know now I'm going to use the rest of my PPP funds for payroll through the end of December. And then you can start planning for a first quarter of, what kind of staffing needs you're going to have. And in terms of budgeting for payroll costs and employee benefits and all these kind of related costs, going back to this last slide on budgeting for gifting and anything else, but if you are really wanting to retain your key people, and that includes clients as well, but making them feel appreciated for what they're doing for you, and how you want to plan to appreciate them this year. Sometimes you may give out gifts every year or bonuses to your employees. That might just not be in the budget this year. So what can you do to be a little more lean and creative? Maybe it's a handwritten card to all of your good clients. So just starting to plan for that now, because the end of the year will be here before we know it. And then in terms of bonuses versus raises, maybe by the end of the year you'll have a little more cash flow and you can pay out holiday bonuses to your employees. But loans or salary increases, raises are a little bit trickier, because that's a permanent increase, and then you're also going to have an increase in payroll tax associated with that. So it's just really sitting down and analyzing all that.
Yep. And you said something really important there about showing appreciation. And it wasn't just to your employees, but also to your clients. And I think that is just an awesome opportunity for any business owner to have a conversation with their clients and their people right now. Sometimes this kind of thing gets overlooked, but honestly, it's just a great reminder to the community to say thank you. Hey, we appreciate your help through this crisis, and for all the people who did patronize your business, a great way to a great time to say thank you and reminding that they're valued people too. And I think building that sense of community, building that sense of let's say presence that's just sort of above and beyond just a transactional business thing, is really a way to stay sticky with your clientele, and to kind of be in front of your clients, as opposed to just kind of there on a transactional basis. So good word, appreciation. Okay, and that's again kind of flows right into this next one, where I think if we're talking about key employees and we're talking about making sure that we have an open line of communication, the idea of a strategy session and a regular planning session is crucial. So Lauren, did you want to go over the team goals and benchmarks part? Because I think that's important to start off with.
And so, if we're talking about retaining key employees and just having a team of employees and everyone that's going to support your business, they need to know what their goals are, as each day. They may have a job description, but they need to know what they're working towards each day. And I also think that this has a huge tie-in with their personal fulfillment. And if they feel like they're part of a team and they feel like they're working towards a purpose, they're very likely going to stay in that job. And even if they know things are tough, they'll stick around. And so it's laying out these goals. It's both qualitative and quantitative, so they can benchmark themselves. And then you can tie in incentives to this, whether it's bonuses or raises or gifts that they might receive based on achieving these goals. It's just a really important strategy to talk about with everyone.
Yep. the #1 cause of workplace dissatisfaction is unclear goals and objectives. That's uncertainty is never something I think people sign up for or people really want in their lives. So in the same way that, COVID's thrown us all for a loop because it's, everything's uncertain. Imagine if that's your daily work life, where you come to work and you're not sure why you're doing anything. So yeah, like Lauren said, just making sure you communicate exactly what the priorities are, what the goals are with your team as often as possible. But I would say no more than, or no less than on a weekly basis is just crucial. And helping your employees understand the difference between goals and tactics, right? Goals are those very high level, macro sort of desires of the business for that year or for your quarter, however you plan. And then tactics are the pieces, the tools that you use to get those goals completed, right? And I think, the danger is making a tactic into a goal, but really you want to make sure that the goal is meaty enough and long-term enough that people can sink their teeth into it and help you develop tactics that will actually result in that goal being achieved. So organizational alignment's pretty important. I come from a bit of a military background, and maybe that's that's probably too much for the average company, but there was something to be said for, hey, make sure every team understands what it is they're doing to support the overall mission, that you can apply that same knowledge to your business, right? Organizational alignment is important, making sure that every team in my business, from me on down, is focused on the goals that are important for this quarter and developing the tactics within those teams to make sure they meet the goal. And finally, just focusing on those things that you can control. We can't control COVID. We can't control what the markets are going to do. We can't really control what our clients are going to do. So the most important thing that you have to remember as a business owner, just for your own headspace and to be, sane right now, is there are things you can definitely control, like your activities, right? The things that you do, the things that your employees do, those are things within your sphere of influence. So make sure that you remind yourself of that every day. Hey, I've got 8 hours. I'm going to make sure that I, focus on those things that I know I can control, I know I can make a difference on. And, we'll try to plan for whatever else we can, but honestly, what's most important is being aligned to goals and focusing on the things that you can do every day to make them happen. I could talk a lot about this, but I think just in the interest of time, we'll kind of wrap up here, and then folks can ask questions as they see fit. So yeah, I think that's it for the organized material. John, we got any questions coming in?
So far we do not. So maybe we'll sit here and gab for a few minutes and see if folks want to text in any questions.
So I did want to add on your last slide there, Adrian, that we were putting an emphasis on teams and companies with employees, and we may have a lot of sole proprietors joining us today, or just single member LLCs, and so it's the same strategy there. So looking at your larger goals for the next year, 5 years, and breaking them into smaller bite-sized pieces over a monthly or weekly basis, so you can really focus on what can you do this week, starting to being innovative and trying new things, whether that's new networking opportunities or marketing, making sure your online presence is very clear and powerful. And so I just wanted to note that even if it's just you, it's the same strategy.
Oh yeah, it's almost more important when it's just you, because it's so easy. It's all in your head. You have all this concepts in your head, but you have to have the discipline maybe to write some of that out, and to write it out, hold yourself accountable to it. That idea that being aligned as an organization, a one-man shop can get out of alignment very quickly as well. And something you said reminded me that we talked a lot about this in some of the earlier webinars I did, which is it's overwhelming to think of all the things you have to do. So you set those little goals, right? You say, hey, the most important thing I'm going to do for this week is make sure that I get this done. And that can be part of accomplishing the greater goal. But I think seeing some success, in little increments is very helpful to a business, right? okay, I won. I won that little, I got that new sign put up over top of the shop. That's great. I've been trying to do that for a year. So you knock that out. I mean, is it a small piece of your marketing plan? Of course, but it's a win that you can celebrate and you can move forward with and kind of, generate a little momentum from, for sure.
Hey, so Melissa wrote in a question, and
All right.
question. She says, what recommendations do you have for what if scenario analysis software? And I presume we're maybe thinking about financial, like you said, Adrian, have those sort of worst case, middle of the road, and best case scenarios. What do you use to sort of put some numbers on that?
Personally, I prefer Excel because it's very simple and it's easy to change. I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for, Melissa, but I think, like, one, you got to be comfortable with it. Most people have this as part of their Office suite. If you don't, you can get it almost free from Google. They have a spreadsheet, but being able to change it the way you want it, manipulate it quickly, and then it makes sense to you, and it's almost universally accepted everywhere else. To me, that those outweigh most of the other considerations. But Lauren, you might have experience outside of that, but I recommend Excel.
I don't have a specific software other than just a spreadsheet. And there's a YouTube video out there, a webinar we did a couple months ago, I think, about kind of budgeting for creating business budgets in times of uncertainty. So that video is out there on the SBDC YouTube channel. And we had an Excel spreadsheet that went along with it. So if you get in touch with one of us at the SBDC, we should be able to send that to you. And so you don't have to recreate the wheel. There's already kind of a budget template there. But that's all. It's just kind of, based on your business, whether it's a product or a service, trying to create some different calculations and things that are unique to your business and what you really want to see in that data.
And start simple. You can go down into the weeds in this sort of planning and really just kind of try to account for everything. But I would say start with a 30,000 foot view, keep it simple, and then if that gives you enough of a picture, great. If you feel like, no, I don't really understand what's going on, then you kind of drill down and work until it makes sense to you. But don't feel like it has to be 100% perfect right out of the gate. I think if you started with 3 simple numbers, revenue, expenses, and whatever debt, even, like, that's enough. Just to do a simple, if my revenue is 0, what are my expenses, and all of a sudden like, you can see how that will play out over a few months. So yeah, start easy, use a simple spreadsheet, and if you find you just can't get what you need out of it, then start getting a little more complicated.
Roger that. Susan's got a question. This one's aimed squarely at you, Lauren. Susan writes, hello, lots of great information today. I suppose that applies to you too, Adrian. But the question part, I just learned today that H&R Block acquired Wave accounting software, and it is free for small business owners. Would you recommend Wave for small business owners? Hard to pass up something free.
So I'm just getting familiar with it myself. I had not really used it until one of my clients got on it this year. So I'm exploring it. So I can't really say if I recommend it or not, but it's definitely worth trying out. I will say that it's better than nothing. So if you don't have any kind of accounting system right now, give it a try. My go-to recommendation is QuickBooks Online. And from what I understand, they're very similar in the way that they work. So could be a really great option. And yeah, I don't know if anything about H&R Block using it. If anything, it's probably going to help H&R Block tax preparers prepare a business tax return, because hopefully more people will have more organized business records using this software. So anything that helps you organize your business income and expenses into nice, neat little financial statements, like a profit and loss statement that you can pull at any time, is enormously beneficial to the success of your business. So definitely try it out. If it doesn't have all the functionality you're looking for, it may be worth investing in something like QuickBooks or Xero. There's a lot of different ones out there, and it's pretty low cost, maybe $12, $15 a month, to be able to have different budgeting and reporting all in the software, and then also integrate with other programs. Like it might have a mileage tracker, it might have time tracking and reporting for employees, all kinds of different things, receipt capture. So try it out and see how it works for you.
I'm actually gonna put in a plug here for something. So I've used Wave, by the way, but this was years ago. I don't know what it's like anymore. And again, speaking from my personal experience, at the time, I did not have a strong understanding of the difference between the idea of keeping books and then the idea of what a CPA does for a business. So this is one of those things where I encourage you to, explore the area of professional service, because you're going to be good at what you're doing in your business, and folks like Lauren are really good at the CPA stuff. And if you try to become what Lauren is, as a CPA to your own business, you will just be forced to neglect other things in your business. So I would say, if you're talking about doing bookkeeping, and you feel like you're going to value the service of a CPA, then really you need to talk to that CPA and have that way of discussion with them, right? That's something that say, hey, how do I support you best? I'm going to be doing my books on a daily basis with this. Is that going to support you when it comes time to do the stuff tax season? And that's really how you set up your business for success. And I know not everybody can have a budget for that, but I really do encourage you. Honestly, this is a realm where there's a reason why these people are experts in what they do, and just make sure you're at least trying out and discussing that service with a real professional.
Thanks for mentioning that, Adrian. Yeah. But because, yeah, even using a software like that may just not automatically do everything for you. Someone, meaning you or a bookkeeper or someone that you hire, may need to go back in and reconcile the bank accounts to the statements, and that's making sure that all the transactions are categorized correctly, because these softwares are sophisticated enough to guess what a transaction is. If it looks like a restaurant, they'll put it as business meals, and so on. But someone has to make sure that it's correct, and especially more complicated things like loan repayments or even just personal expenses or owner distributions. All these things need to be categorized correctly so that your tax liability is ultimately calculated correctly based on what actually happened in the business.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, folks. Any further questions? Give it maybe another minute. And while we're waiting, we'll just use this moment to one more time plug the North Metro SBDC as well. You can make a free one-on-one appointment with Adrian, with Lauren, with any of our consultants, and discuss these issues or anything that's going on with your business or your business plan for a business that you haven't started yet. And the SBDC services are free, always have been free, will continue to be free, and we're really here because our mission is to support and grow small business. That's what we do. That's what we value. So check that out, northmetrosbdc.com. If you haven't had an appointment with us yet, then I encourage you to check that out today. Not seeing any more questions, so maybe we'll wrap it up. Thanks again, Lauren and Adrian, for another fantastic presentation. It's always good to have you back here on the show.
No, I mean, just, take it a day at a time. That's what we're all doing. We've probably heard enough of this too shall pass to be sick of hearing that, but there's an energy that comes from a plan, and that's something that's kept me in the game with advising people through their plans. Is once you get going on it and you start laying the groundwork and you really make that transition from what's up here to something written down, there's an undeniable momentum that you and boost in your own morale that you will get from that. So not to be undersold is the emotional benefit of doing this. You just, you'll feel it in your bones, and some things that seemed really horrible and daunting will just be less so because you've actually documented it. So just capitalize on it, use that to ride it out, get through it.
Absolutely. And I say, as a small business owner, don't feel like you're on an island and that everything's falling on your shoulders, because there are so many people out here to support you and get you in touch with someone else that can support you. And even if it's a matter of having a virtual happy hour or in-person happy hour with other business owners, just a vent, just don't get overwhelmed by all the decisions and everything that you need to make, and really have confidence that you know your business in and out, and you will get through this. And like I said, we're here to help you through it.
Yep.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Adrian. Thank you to our audience for signing in and being part of this today. We'll catch you on the next one.